Hey everybody, this is David Wolf with our Paramotor Nation. Welcome to tonight's pre-show. Hope you're having a fun time chatting with other paramotor enthusiasts watching with you right now. Hey, I just want to take a quick second and just thank everybody who supports the show, whether you're a sponsor, whether you're a Patreon, whether you're doing a super chat during the show. And some people have asked me how to become a Patreon and how to do super chat, so I wanted to just talk about that very briefly. All you need to do is click on the little button down here at the bottom right of the screen. You can go ahead and pick out any dollar amount you want to donate to the show and leave a comment as well. I'll read it on the show for you. If you'd like to become a Patreon, you can go onto the website, ourparamotornation.com, and there's information to fill out there. All right, we're just going to start the show here in a few moments. I talked about the sponsors. Let's hear about them right now.
Welcome to Our Paramotor Nation. Tonight's show is sponsored by PPG lights. Make one heck of an impression with countless patterns and colors on your paramotor. Lone Star Paramotor has become one of the most sought-out paramotor schools, offering foot launching and strike training classes and much more. Aviator Paramotor is a cornerstone for paramotor training while offering its students some of the top paramotor equipment. Why PPG discovered power paragliding has helped people from around the world get into our great sport. Charlie Soap, an all-natural laundry detergent and household cleaner, are like no other. Why My PPG, offering a full-service paramotor training experience with 3 on-site instructors and limited class sizes. One-Up Adventures and ParamotorProps.com, sharing their passion for flight on adventures around the world. Skylab Paramotor SIV, teaching paramotor pilots of all skill levels collapse recovery and advanced maneuvers. JK Custom Cars is a father and daughter-run small business, taking your vision and immortalizing it forever. Paraswag USA, your complete power paragliding gear source. iFly Indiana provides USPPA certified power paragliding training on your equipment or on theirs for prices as low as $2,500. Wicked Wings logo can help you have a one-of-a-kind glider with one or multiple colors. Visit the Our Paramotor Nation website. Check out the upcoming shows, the past shows, and all of its sponsors. And now, let's get started with this episode of Our Paramotor Nation.
My father was an aviation cadet in World War II. He was flying Stearman's out of Luke-Ox No. 2, which is now at Scottsdale Airport, and then his instructor flew up into a cloud one day and didn't come back. And so he self-initiated elimination from pilot training, and he joined the Army band as a drummer and toured Europe opposing Glenn Miller's orchestra. I never envisioned being a professional pilot or even military. That was too much of a dream, but it just kind of, it was in the background. When I was in college, I was a computer engineer and decided I didn't want to spend the rest of my life working in a cubicle, turning into Dilbert with my tie turning up. So I decided, I'll join the Air Force and do something cool and be an engineer. And then a friend of mine who was in the ROTC program said, oh, don't do that, go be a pilot. I'm like, what, are you kidding me? I didn't even think that was a possibility. So I went out and talked to them and took all the tests and did very well. And yeah, next thing you know, I had a year off before I went to pilot training at Williams Air Force Base and became a pilot, teaching B-52 and KC-135 pilots how to fly the airplane. And basically the personnel folks got a hold of me and called me up and basically told me I had to get a real job because we were having way too much fun up there. And long story made short, I turned down an F-16 assignment to have an opportunity to go fly U-2s, and which I jumped on because to me that was just too much of an opportunity to pass up.
The Lockheed U2 is a US military reconnaissance aircraft, a spy plane, which can reach altitudes over 70,000 feet. It first saw action during the Cold War, flying reconnaissance missions over the former Soviet Union, China, Vietnam, and Cuba. At over 65 years old, the U2 is still in service and among only a handful of aircraft which can fly in the stratosphere.
I remember sitting in the airplane and just looking around at all the contractors, and there's LOX, liquid oxygen venting from the aircraft, and the PSD folks are doing the integration. I'm just kind of sitting there looking back at all this, and I'm just like, I am not really doing this. This is just crazy to think that this is my job. And all these people are here just to launch and get me into the air for this 9-hour sortie. And it really is an incredibly humbling experience. And then flying missions over Bosnia and looking down at Sarajevo, and to think that the year before the Winter Olympics were there. It was just amazing. Just, you know, the things you get to see from that perspective, it makes you feel very small and insignificant. It was just an amazing experience.
Welcome to our Paramotor Nation, everyone. Can you only imagine flying that high in the air? We're going to get a chance to talk with Jeff Fletcher. You're going to be able to ask any question you want of this amazing guy with an amazing background and amazing story. Hope everybody had a great Sunday. First of all, thank you, Mark Roger and Ken Stamey, for the super chat donations. You don't even wait for the show to start. It might not even be that good of a show, but thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate everybody that does support the show in any way, whether you're a Patreon or you're a sponsor, or if you just make a super chat. And as always, 50% of the super chats in tonight's show will go to Resurgence PPG. So thank you for supporting us, and thank you for supporting the veterans as well. I want to just share something. You know, this is our 102nd episode, and I'm going to do something a little different that I've never done before. I just want to share a little bit of my experience of just something that kind of happened today, and I was reflecting on. This morning, I got up very, very early. I got up about 5 a.m. I was out at the airport at 6 a.m., and at 6:25, 30 minutes before sunrise, with my strobe light on, I lifted off the ground and just had an amazing flight. The fact that it was 34 degrees didn't even bother me. I was dressed appropriately. It was awesome seeing that sunrise come up. Flew for an hour and 15 minutes. I was about a mile and a half away, and I just went down to idle, and I just trusted my glide ratio, and sure enough, I landed about 20 feet away from my car, and it was absolutely amazing. And it was one of those surreal, spiritual flights that we get every once in a while as paramotor pilots. And then at 10:45, my family, we went to church, and during one of the songs, they were showing these drone shots. And I was thinking about just what we get to do. The drone shots were of mountains and ocean waves, just sitting over these ocean waves crashing, and sand dunes. And, you know, it was there to raise an just to raise emotions, let's just say, for the people there. But for me, I'm like, I see this all the time in the videos of my friends. I'm not going to name all the people whose videos show this stuff, but isn't it just amazing what we get to do as paramotor pilots? Something that people can only dream about doing. And we get this, I'll call it a blessing, opportunity, whatever you want to call it. But then I start thinking too about some things that I've been hearing recently about, you know, people getting very seriously injured and doing from things that can be avoided. You know, low flying acro, things like that. I was sent a video earlier this week titled "Paramotor Crashes into Water," and it really disturbed me because a guy was flying around, did a foot drag, sounds great, a lot of fun, and then as his buddy went into the water, he starts laughing, and he lands, and his buddy was pulling out his glider, he was okay and everything, but then I see in the comments, someone left a message saying, hey, can I add this to my playlist of Gone Wrong, a Gone Wrong playlist? This isn't a joke, this is serious. Let's not screw this up for everybody. Let's let everybody go home to their families every night. All right, I'm done with my soapbox. It's just something that's really been weighing on my mind for a while. But we have Jeff Fletcher here tonight, and this is going to be an absolutely amazing show. Next week, our show is going to be our Dark Horse episode. We've got Kurt Duggar and Gretchen Cathwood. They are our very, very special guests, and that's also going to be co-hosted by Anthony Vella and Todd Scandrett. The week after that, One Up Adventures down in Costa Rica. They're having a heck of an adventure if you've been following them at all. We'll be talking with them as well. In the meantime, I would like to introduce you to John Gasparrepa. What's up, Johnny boy? How are you?
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Man, I got my soapbox out there, but I know you have had similar feelings. What do you feel about all that, Johnny? Not to put you on the spot.
It's a topic I think we need to start talking about. There's just too many accidents, too many deaths happening, and I'm 4 years into this sport, and I got away with quite a few. And I look back, and I say to myself, I could have done a lot of things different, and I've dialed back the craziness quite a bit, and I kind of sit back and watch the other guys do it. And I'm not a fan of it anymore. I got to tell you, I'm just tired of losing people. So
I so agree with you, my friend. I so agree with you. Let's talk down in Texas, the man who's got I saw a picture of 170,000 bees in the back of his vehicle. Dave Ruff, how are you, sir?
What's up? What's up? Yeah, 170,000 bees were flying around. Well, maybe not all, but yeah, that's what I was dealing with yesterday, and I got stung once, believe it or not.
Which is amazing because you never. I see you in the backyard and all these beehives and everything, and you never get stung, but you actually got a stinger, huh?
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
I probably average around 5 to 9 stings a month now,
Oh, is it that much?
somewhere in there.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
somewhere in there.
congratulations! I also heard that you are a new father of a new third cow.
Yeah. So Sarah bought this cow. That's what we're gonna go with, and it's got a little 5-day old calf on it. It's a Jersey milking cow, so she's in milk, and yeah, so I get to now milk 2 cows a day.
All right. Very cool. Well, let's waste no more time. Let's get to our guest tonight. Jeff Fletcher is here. Welcome, Jeff, to the show. It's so great to see you. How are you today,
Great,
sir?
great to be here. Thank you.
Wow. So, I mean, with this much rich history, first, I do have to say one thing. Do want to thank Greg Anthony Harris for helping us get this show put together, and also for letting us use that intro video. I thought that was a great way for anybody that doesn't know Jeff to be able to, bring it in here and get to know who he is. So, Jeff, let's go back to, I guess, the early days. Your dad was in the service, correct?
Yeah, he was an aviation cadet, going through pilot training, flying Stearmans in the Phoenix Valley, and yeah, apparently yeah, his instructors, went up into a cloud, and apparently he was like the best instrument pilot in the squadron, and something happened, and he died. And my dad was sitting there just looking around, going, "What am I doing here?" I mean, he was the best guy in the squadron, and he didn't make it back, so he just kind of said, "I'm out." And so he was a very talented drummer as a youth growing up, and he ended up joining the army band and touring Europe, kind of off venue weekends with Glenn Miller's orchestra. So I can credit some of my musical gifts, or actually my son's musical talents, to my dad, and kind of planting the seed. Because I remember, years ago when I was a kid, he showed me a few pictures of what it was like, being in pilot training back in the day. So that was where the seed was probably planted very long time ago.
But was there a big interest in your life growing up to be a pilot, or is it just?
No, not at all. I mean, it was just the standard, model airplanes, and just everything with relating to history and studying airplanes, but never in a million years thought I would ever do it as a professional pilot. That was kind of inconceivable.
Our friend Todd is asking questions right off the top. He wants to know, did you go through flight school with Gary Powers?
Not Gary Powers. I met his son, however, at Oshkosh, finally years later. But so he's a fan of the program.
There you go. Appreciate that question there, Todd. Thank you. All right. So, what is it called? An Army brat? Was that basically your traveling around as an Army brat?
No, my dad, after World War II, he went to dental school. And so he served in the Korean War as a dentist, and my mom was actually a dental hygienist that they met in school. So when they married, so my dad was never active duty, when I was around. Although I have 3 older brothers, and 2 of them went into the military. One became a JAG in the Army, and the other one became a doctor in the Navy, spent his time with the SEALs for most of his career as a doctor. So I do have a lot of military influence that they went off into. So it was not an unusual career path, let's put it that way. We're somewhat familiar with it.
So now what a lot of people don't know is that you have a family history in the space program, correct?
Yeah, this was kind of weird. My dad showed me something in an encyclopedia somewhere. It's like, "Oh yeah, this is some relative of yours." I didn't know anything about it, but I was signing up for a math course in college, and the guy looks at my name on the card and he says Fletcher, and he says, "Any relation to the famed physicist Harvey Fletcher?" And I'm like, "No, how do you know about him?" Or, I mean, actually, yes, I am related, but I was like, "How do you know about him?" And he's like, "Oh, there's a Fletcher Science Building at BYU." I'm like, "No idea." But anyway, Harvey Fletcher was an acoustical physicist who was like head of Bell Labs development for like decades. And he had 6 children who all got their PhDs in mathematics and physics. And one of those was James Fletcher. James was my dad's first cousin. And his claim to fame was that he's the only person to be NASA administrator twice. He was NASA administrator at the end of the Apollo program. And then when the Challenger blew up, he came out of retirement to go through that whole rebooting of NASA. It was a side of the family I knew very little about up until fairly recently. But it was just crazy because I read stuff that Harvey did as an engineer and things that he developed, like, hearing aids technology. And he's known as the father of stereophonic sound. And the crazy thing is 2 of my children went into career fields initially that were directly related to those things that this great uncle did. It was crazy. I mean, I can't even call it a coincidence.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So now you decide to go to college, then you decide to go into the Air Force, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something fell up there. All right. But you wanted to go in as an engineer. At what point did you decide? Chris Fenimore, I'm going to get to your question in a second, buddy. At what point did you decide pilot? Let's try this. Or it was just like, oh, that's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, it was actually a friend of mine, like I saw in the video, he was a mechanical engineer, and I knew him very well. But he was in the ROTC program, and he literally was like, "Oh, don't be an engineer, go be a pilot." And I got into the program late. I was in my junior year of college, so ROTC is a minimum 2 years. So I was already kind of late in the game at this process. So I had to join ROTC as an engineer. They sent me to field training and this sort of stuff. And then when they came back, I don't know what happened. I think they broke someone's leg and gave me their slot or something. But they really wanted to get me to pilot training and specifically to go to Williams Air Force Base. And so when I got my orders, I was shocked to find that I had a year off before I went to pilot training. So it's like, what do you do for a year? I've already extended enough. And so I ended up working as an engineer then at Long Beach for Douglas Aircraft, doing contract surveillance for some of the military programs there. ACES 2 ejection seats, F-18 bomb racks, C-17, KC-10, the Navy's T-45 are all projects that we worked with.
Now in the video we saw, it said that you trained pilots for, was it the B-50? What was it?
Yeah, so I went to pilot training, flying a T-37, T-38, and the Air Force has a program, they call it FAPE, First Assignment Instructor Pilots. So typically about half to 2/3 of the instructor force are what they call FAPEs. These are people who they hand select after they finish pilot training to become back as instructors. And I got chosen to come back as a T-37 instructor. So that meant I spent another 3 years there at Williams Air Force Base as an instructor. And I had wanted to fly fighters. That was kind of like my dream. But unfortunately, at the time, the assignments, they were not giving any fighters to any of the instructor pilots out of the pilot training there. So I went up to what's called the Companion Trainer Program, or what used to be called the ACE program. And back in the day of Strategic Air Command, we had the B-52 pilots and tanker pilots. They used to set alert a lot, and they didn't get a lot of flying time because they sat alert, Cold War, that sort of thing. So in order to gain experience for the co-pilots, they would give at the bases that they're at either T-37s or T-38s, and you'd get them checked out on those aircraft, and you would take 2 of them and put them together in the airplane, tell them to go forth and aviate. And it was a really inexpensive way for them to get flight experience as they progressed to become future aircraft commanders. And so I did that up at Fairchild for 4 years, flying with the tanker and B-52 pilots up there. So it was a really neat program. It was very effective, very cost-effective way to get a lot of flying experience for those guys.
All right. So then at that point, now you've got a decision. Do I want to be Maverick and go to Top Gun and fly an F-16, correct? Or do I want to go into the U2 program?
Yeah, it was, honestly, our initial desire was we just wanted to stay up at Spokane. We love it up there. It's a beautiful country, and just, fly a tanker or something up there. But I did some initial, looking into that, and it didn't really work out. Just nothing lined up right. And in that particular day, with the Gulf War and stuff going on, just about anybody in the Air Force was going TDY or temporary duty, upwards of 200 days a year. And I saw numerous friends who were in the tanker program who'd get a phone call in the middle of the night, like, all right, you guys are in crew rest and you're deploying in 12 hours. And you're like, yeah, but what about, I gotta, my Boy Scouts are doing this and that. And like, sorry. And watching their lives get turned upside down. And so F-16s, pretty much everyone was doing this amount of volume of flying and deploying. So I did know that the U-2s, when they deployed, they tended to go to nicer places. And their schedule was more controlled. It was like 2 months home, 2 months gone, that sort of thing. So yeah, it was hard to pass up. I actually, got off the phone with the personnel guys, and one of my buddies was sitting there filling out some paperwork. I'm like, hey, what are you doing over there? And he's like, oh, it's an application for the U2 program. I'm like, give me that when you're done. And the both of us ended up interviewing and getting accepted into the program. So the plan was to do my operational tour stuff, get out there on the road, get all the operational experience, and then move into the training squadron. Because that would lock me in for another couple of years where they could not move me against my will. And then I would be within enough time, I'd be close enough to my pilot bonus commitment date that essentially they could not move me against my will. And so I could stay there for like 5 or 6 years and until my commitment was done, then I could get out.
Okay. So then you started training all the pilots?
Exactly. Yeah. There's 2 squadrons. There's the active duty squadron called the 99th. And then the training squadron is called the 1st Reconnaissance Squadron. And the 1st is stationed at Beale Air Force Base, north of Sacramento. And the 99th is there as well. And then we have deployed locations all over the world. The 1st Reconnaissance Squadron actually has its origins in World War I. If you look at the tail flash on all the U-2s, there's like 5 Maltese crosses up on the tail, and those are actually campaign ribbons from World War I. They were originally flying Spads, back in the day. So so I became an instructor, and then eventually an interview pilot. There was just a very small handful of us. They were 2-seat instructors who also got checked out to do the initial interviews of brand new pilots. Because with that process, people you have to apply to the program. And we would look at the interview packages, and about half of those we'd just toss and say, nope, not picking those. And the guys that looked promising, we'd bring them out for an interview. And the interview would consist of about a week of interviewing them and letting them meet people in the squadron, and kind of a 2-way street. We're interviewing them, they're looking at us, seeing if this is what they really want to do. And then after that, we would give them 3 flights in the aircraft, 2 flights with an instructor, and the second instructor would be in the mobile, the chase car. And then the 3rd flight, we would flip positions. And so the person that was in the mobile would now be kind of acting like a check pilot in the aircraft. And then once they get down with that 3rd sortie, we'd do a yay nay of where it looks like the guy is figuring things out quickly enough to handle the aircraft. One of the things we found out about the airplane is it's literally like flying. It's like riding a bicycle, or say like surfing or skateboarding. It's a skill that you've never done before, and you've just got to figure out. And it's like that. It's not like anything you've ever done before as a pilot. And so you have to figure it out, because you don't actually land the aircraft. You fly it down to 2 feet above the ground, and you hold it there until you feel it starting to lose control effectiveness. It's, as we refer to it, as it's slipping over the backside of your L over D curve. And as you feel it start to lose control effectiveness, you have to just have to bring the yoke back and pin the yoke in your lap. And the whole time you're doing this, you're putting whatever rudder inputs you need to keep it straight down the runway and keeping the wings level. So it was totally normal, or to be like 100% like fully cross controlled, like full aileron in one direction, full opposite rudder, trying to keep everything straight as you touch down, because you do not want to touch down and drift or crab. And it's one of those things you kind of figure it out quickly or you don't. And the amazing thing is we'd have guys that go off like at a staff tour, for instance, and be out of the aircraft for 3 to 5 years, haven't flown a thing. We'd bring them back to get them requalled in the aircraft, and I'd give them 1 dual sortie in the back seat in the U2, and the next flight they would fly solo, and it's like they never left. And that's when I realized it was literally like a skill, like riding a bike. It's just something you never forget. it was really fascinating.
It seems like there's a lot of things that are very unique. I did some research, obviously, before the show to get to understand the U2 a little better. Um, it just seems like a very unique aircraft to fly. The way it takes off, how it needs assistance by, as you mentioned, a chase car. You have to have someone right there with you, and then the way it lands to us, basically a stall point, where eventually one tip will come down and just touch down and stop, and that's really interesting. We have a lot of questions in the chat for you already, Jeff. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna get to them so
you
we're
bet.
not missing them. Somehow it gets into music here. You'll find in just a second. So let's get started. First question comes from Chris Fenimore. He says, "What is the longest U2 flight, and what is the highest U2 flight that Jeff was on?"
Uh, One, we upgraded the back in the late 90s, we put a new engine in the aircraft. We went from the J79, the turbojet, to a high bypass turbofan. Had great fuel efficiency. So when I was flying my initial sorties, we were flying the R model U2, and 9 hours was your typical sortie duration. Later on, when we had the S model, you could take off on a 9 hour flight and not even bother putting a full load of gas on because you'd land with a ton of fuel. So we could fly 12 hours easily. You could fly, unrefueled, no problem at all. So during like the second Gulf War, guys were flying ops missions of 12 hours. As far as altitudes, the original R model, we would say, above 60,000 feet was pretty typical because as you fly, you're constantly climbing as you burn off fuel. So depending on your mission load, the sensors you're carrying, how much fuel you're carrying determines how high you go. As you burn off fuel, you just keep going higher and higher. And with the S model, we shed some weight off the aircraft and had a little extra thrust. So we could go above 70,000 feet very easily, just routinely.
Very good. All right, next question we have here is from Mark H. What special training requirements were there transitioning to the U2 from tankers or cargo? Great question.
It was like I said, we had the initial interview process, and then once we came out to Beale, it was about let's say a 4-month training program where we'd teach you how to fly the aircraft in the low altitude environment. And then once you solo the aircraft, then you'd kind of have to learn all over again, wearing the full pressure suit and then doing what we call mission qualification, high altitude stuff in the aircraft. So, the transition there was, there's a few unique things we had to do, like I say, with the full pressure suit and all that. So it was, just like once you come out of pilot training and you have experience in a certain aircraft, you go to your training unit to learn all the specifics with that particular aircraft. So pretty similar across the board, depending on whatever airplane you'd be flying.
All right. Next question comes from Adam Giles. He wants to know, has Jeff ever seen a UFO up there in the stratosphere? Jeff, that's a great question. You may not be allowed to reveal the answer to this.
No, that's actually something. When I was in high school, I read a ton of stuff. I mean, if it was like Bermuda Triangle, UFOs, sci-fi, I read everything I get my hands on. And I was always fascinated with that. And especially hearing accounts of, significant aeronautical events with the space program, astronauts, seeing things. And I never saw a thing. I remember being at Beale, driving around the mobile and poking through the old SR-71 hangars, just kind of like peeking through the door going, all right, there's got to be an Aurora in here somewhere. And never saw anything, unfortunately. So I was like, dang it. Yeah, nothing interesting. Although one time I was flying a mission over, I wasn't technically up in Iraq. It was over Saudi Arabia still, but it was an early dawn night mission. And we had some issues with the data link. And so to fix that, we'd kind of turn south instead of going north and get closer to our ground station to try and get things fixed. Because if you get a good data link with the ground station, they can fix a lot of stuff and reboot things. And I was just kind of wandering aimlessly and just kind of wondering, does anybody really care that I'm out here just flying outside my normal orbit, just wandering aimlessly? And I'm looking down at our threat warning thing, and I could see there's a 4-ship of some fighters way down low. And I'm like, wow, those guys are up here early. And I remember looking down at that. And then I looked up to my left and I saw this fireball coming up and over the horizon at me.
What?
And I'm thinking, oh, this is what an SA-5 looks like coming at you from Syria or something. Because that's typically how an SA-5 is going to get you. It's going to be up so high, it's actually going to come down on you from above. not like from below coming up at you. And I was like, holy cow. And just that gets your heart going. And it burned up like right in front of the aircraft. I remember seeing the movie The Right Stuff for the first time, and they had pictures of like the Mercury capsule coming in, and it looks like it's all in flames, and there's stuff flying off of it. And I remember watching that in the movies, going, "Oh, that is so fake looking. Oh, look at that. That looks ridiculous." That's exactly what this thing looked like. And it turned out it was a meteor that was like super close and burned up like right in front of me. And I was like, "Okay, I'm awake now, and like I'm out of here."
The thing that caught me right there, Dave and John, that he said is, I didn't see anything interesting up there. Really?
But that was that was the one thing that was like, okay, that was cool.
We're going to be talking a little bit about Jeff getting into paramotoring. Little known fact, Jeff did train with Ron Torn over at Lone Star Paramotor, and because of that, we are going to give away this Lone Star Paramotor hat this evening. So pay attention, because Mr. Dave Ruff is going to be asking questions later on, or asking one question later on, and the winner of that in the chat will receive that amazing Lone Star Paramotor hat. All right, let's go to another question here. This question comes from Hot Buttered Steve. He said, I'd like to know what it's like trying to land a U2. And I know you gave us a little bit of more details. Is there more than what you said about that?
Yeah, people, because, well, the airplane originally was never designed to have landing gear. It was going to take off on a dolly and just belly in, skid in. And so it was never designed to have wheels from the get-go. But the Air Force, when they decided to transition the program from the CIA and all that, they're like, well, you got to have landing gear. And the only place to put the landing gear was in between the inlets in the front and the bifurcated duct up there. And so that puts the main wheel way out in front of the center of gravity of the aircraft, which is really bad for like ground looping, because it's a tail dragger. The tail wheel's in the back, and the tail wheel only steers like 6.5 degrees from center line. And when you touch down, the tail wheel would just slide all over the place. And unless you've got the yoke just absolutely pinned in your lap to get downforce on it. And because the way it wants to ground loop and it's kind of unstable on the ground, people describe it. It's like landing it is kind of like being in a pickup truck going down the highway, and you're on a bicycle and you ride out the back of the truck. Mm-hmm. And so you're landing like front wheel of the bicycle first, and then the back wheel touching down, and then you're trying to keep it straight, and then while you slow down. And that's kind of the physics of what's going on. Yeah, so it's kind of weird.
Interesting. All right, now this is a question that I think came up a little bit earlier that I think people have been waiting. This is a really important question, maybe. I don't know, probably not, but let's ask it anyways. Anthony Peregringo wants to know, does he listen to U2 while he's flying a U2? Have you ever listened to U2 while flying a U2?
That's a good question. I did a lot of books on tape, so I'm not sure if I listened to a whole lot of music while I was flying, but a lot of books on tape, though, yeah.
But that's a great question. So you're up there for hours upon hours, floating on the air. What are you thinking about? Who was it? Was Giles last week? We had Giles Fowler on, and Giles talked about keeping his mind occupied as he flew up to 21,000 feet on his paramotor.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure you were focusing on the aircraft, but at times you might have been zoning out. What did you do to keep your mind sharp while you were flying that high?
Yeah, it depends on the mission. Like some of the missions were just insanely boring, and you were just literally just flying 9 hours in circles. And so, yeah, you do things to like books on tape or Reader's Digest, or you bring newspapers or things like that. Just anything to keep your brain busy. Some guys would go up there and they'd try to write letters, but they realized that was bad because you'd actually get the bends in your fingers, and so things like that. A lot of books on tape, or just reading, that sort of thing.
So don't you wish the Paramotor podcast from Anthony Vella would have been out earlier? You could have been.
Oh my gosh, if podcasts existed back in the day, that would have been awesome. Yeah.
All right, let's go to another question here. This is another one from Chris Fennemer. How often did you have to do in-flight refueling in the U2? Was it on every flight?
Yeah, the U2 flies unrefueled. It doesn't ever require in-flight fueling. It can fly 14 hours unrefueled.
Wow.
You could take off from Beale and fly nonstop to Istres, France, or to Canberra, Australia, unrefueled. Yeah, it's just ridiculous, the range. I mean, they did do tests where they did put a probe on on a U2 and tested probe and drogue with a basket refueling, just to see if they could do it. But it was kind of like, why? This is like practicing bleeding. We don't need this capability. We can get close enough on our forward operating bases to never need to refuel.
Interesting. You did think that much flying you would need to refuel. That's
Mm-mm.
crazy. All right, Craig Taylor, what and when caused Mr. Fletcher to transition to PPG? So we can ask that now, but I know we got a couple more U2 questions, but we can
Sure.
it's fine. We'll bounce back and forth
Mm-hmm.
between those questions. So let's go ahead. What I know we had talked about this a little earlier. I wanted to say, hey, look, you've done this great thing. Why would you possibly go into this? But actually, let's ask that. I'm going to let you ask that question, but I know Dave also had a question he wanted to ask you too. So Dave, what was that question before?
Actually, I've got two if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it, and then we'll finish up with Craig's
Mm-hmm.
question as well.
All right. So the first one is you were a U2 pilot and then you transitioned over to airliner. How? I mean, what's it like to go from 70 plus thousand feet to only being capped out at 35 to 40,000?
Yeah, there is no comparison, as far as like challenge or interesting. I mean, flying airliners is so ridiculously easy. There's two of you in the airplane. There's so much redundancy and safety built in. It's just crazy. I mean, you can always challenge yourself, just like Dave was talking about. He had like the perfect flight in the morning, where it was just like, wow. I mean, you can always challenge yourself and try to have like the perfect flight. And there's things that you can do. There's enough latitude in how we fly the airplane in the airline world to keep it interesting and entertaining. But yeah, it's definitely not, flying the U2. I mean, just to be able to fly in a shirt sleeve environment, not wearing a full pressure suit, was like, oh my gosh, this is glorious. I can just sit here and relax. And, but some guys' vision or dream of like flying an airline is like to fly for 14 hours across the pond with their feet on the dash. And to me, that is like, I get bored if the flight's over an hour long. To me, that's my happy spot. If it's more than an hour, I am bored, because you take off, you land, you climb to descend. Anything else in between is like, now what? Now you're just stick a fork in my eye. Where it's, at Southwest Airlines, especially, our guys we're known for hand flying a lot. We do more touch and goes and more everything else, flights every day than anybody. And that's what I like doing. So that's why when I did go to the airline world, I had no desire to fly for the airlines at all, unless it was Southwest Airlines. But, back in the day, you had to have a 737 type rating, which is, like an $8,000 expense. And when you got 4 kids and all this sort of stuff, I mean, I was like, that to me seemed like an insurmountable obstacle at the time. But then a guy in my squadron, and the other thing is too, is like to get your type rating and your airline transport pilot rating, typically you got to go to some place and fly some light twin around and do all this silliness and take a check ride in an airplane that you'd never see again. And to me, that just seemed like an incredible waste of time. But one of the guys in my squadron just walked in one day and was like, hey, Fletch, let's go to Southwest Airlines, get our ATPs together and go fly for Southwest. And I'm like, what? And he explained the process. We went to a place called Higher Power Aviation, where we could get our type ratings and our flight engineer tests and the whole check ride in just one fell swoop. And I'm like, oh, that seems like a smart way to do it. And so at the time, we're like, yeah, what's another $8,000 in debt? Sure, no problem. And so off we went. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And then my next question, this just kind of hit me, is, okay, so you're at 70,000 plus feet and you start rolling those throttles down to come down. How long does it take you to get down from altitude?
We would plan on 120 miles in 35 minutes. So we'd always flight plan. And so we would actually call into our base ops and talk to the mobile and say, we're going to be landing at this time. And then, because most airports we had to fly, we had to like basically close down the airport and the area and the airspace around it, because when we'd touch down, we'd land, we'd close the runway or wherever we landed for a while until we got clear. So we had to basically say, we're going to own this runway and have our landing time chosen within like a few minutes of each other. So they know exactly when we're going to land. And so basically whatever I told them that I'm going to land, I'm up at altitude. And when I see 35 minutes from that time, boom, that's when I pull the power back and I start my descent. And as long as I was within about 120 miles, I know, yeah, I'll make it fine and idle all the way, and I'll have to push the power up and burn gas. So yeah,
That's amazing.
we pretty much had it down to a science. You could nail it.
Very cool. Very cool.
All right, let's go back to Craig's question then. Going into PPG.
Well, I've been into radio controlled airplanes, forever and ever, and all through military buddies. We've been always following that. And years ago, I discovered the Flight Test RC YouTube channel. Those guys are awesome out there in Ohio, and they have part of their channel is they do full scale aviation topics. And one year they happened to be at Oshkosh and they saw the Paradigm aerobatic team and like, what's this? So they went down and did a story about them down at Aviator, and they were so intrigued with that. Half a dozen of the guys went back 6 months later, and they all got trained, and they highly documented that whole process. And so because I was following their channel, I saw the whole experience down at Aviator, and just something in me just says, okay, I got to try this. I got to do this. I have no idea what it was. It was just, I just felt compelled to go check it out.
You had to run into the air.
Yeah. And funny, I was living in east of Austin at the time, and I was based in Houston. So I used to drive back and forth that 2 hours every week. And on the way back, I used to pass by the Smithville airport, and there were trike flyers that I would see occasionally flying over the road. So I had seen trikes in the air and kind of like, oh, that's interesting. But I had never seen anyone foot launch. So up until that point to see what that was all about. But yeah, it was something when I learned about Travis and Eric Farewell and those guys and their backgrounds, I really felt drawn into how they were doing, because I knew they were expanding, and training was just, I mean, they were getting so backlogged. And with my background in the U2 world, after I left the active duty, I went back, did several years as a reservist doing courseware development for the U2 and Global Hawk, doing computer-based training and syllabus development, and all this kind of crazy stuff. And so I just kind of had this idea of like, I wonder what these guys are doing. Is any of this applicable to what they're doing? And so that's what kind of drew me in.
Very cool. Another question here. This is from Resurgence PPG. Who was your first tandem passenger once you got your rating?
That would be Todd. Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah.
He loves to ask those questions.
Todd
loves to ask those questions.
Yeah, he does. All right, here's another one here. This one is from Mark H. Okay, and this is a good question. Bathroom breaks. 9 hours up there. Did you take magazines and newspapers with you? That's great.
Yeah, that's interestingly enough, part of the U2 training syllabus, there's an actual checkbox for successful use of what's known as the UCD, or the urinary collection device. And yeah, it was a big deal. It's basically, it's kind of like this semi-rigid condom thing that like Velcros into your shorts. And it has, when you get suited up in the aircraft, you come walking out with this thing on, and when you go climb into the suit, there's a little quick connect. It plugs into a hose on one of the left leg of the suit that goes to a valve. And so while you're in the aircraft, you can actually close the outflow valve of the suit, which pressurizes it to about 3.5 psi, and then you open the valve, and it essentially becomes like a vacuum system. But it's a hard thing to train your brain to like, it's okay to just let it go.
Yeah.
Because your brain's going, but no, I'm going to wet myself. And like, no, I don't want to do this. But then you have to kind of tell yourself, it's okay. It's okay. It's going to be okay. And of course, the other comical thing was when the physiology guys, they hand you this UCD thing. They really don't give you a whole lot of instructions. They hand you like a pair of scissors and this thing. And on the end of it has like this conical membrane thing, and they basically say trim to size.
Oh no.
But
how many of the guys lie on that question?
Yeah, they say don't have an overinflated image of yourself when you do this, because if you cut this thing off and it's too loose, then you're gonna whittle all over yourself. And of course, if it's too tight, then it's like trying to, it just doesn't go, and so that's painful. Yeah. So
can you imagine you walk in and one day it is, okay guys, today we're gonna learn how to pee in your suit. Interesting. We have a question here from Yankee Paramotor. Is there ever turbulence at 70,000 feet?
Generally, it's like Groundhog Day. Every day is minus 62 degrees, winds are light and variable. No matter where you take off, whether it's Korea in the wintertime or Saudi in the summertime, it's always exactly the same. There's no clouds, there's no nothing. Everything's below you. It's exactly the same. But there can be severe turbulence in our orbits in the Korean theater. We could have incredible turbulence. In fact, we lost an aircraft, Marty McGregor. His aircraft broke up because of in-flight turbulence. Caused the aircraft to break up, and he ejected and hit the canopy. And anyway, it was a horrible thing. But yeah, it can be severe. I never encountered it over in Korea. Some of the worst turbulence I encountered was like over Tahoe in California. It really could wake you up. Pretty rare, but it does happen.
Yeah. Here's another question here. This came in earlier from Kelby Cox. He says, while you were flying, did you ever see any battle like in Desert Storm?
You said battle or combat?
Battle, yeah, combat. Could you see things down there happening like that?
I think
no. Yeah.
He was talking like air to air, like stuff. Like
no, we were so high up you could very rarely see anything.
Yeah, good.
And we would get indications of things happening, like SAM launches and things like that, towards us. But at this point, you can never see anything because they were doing what they call unguided shots. That are just there's no hope. It was almost laughable. But other guys who flew in the Gulf War during the initial phases at night and stuff, they could see a lot. It was pretty incredible.
Interesting. All right, so now you're flying PPG. You've been flying for 5 years. You trained with Ron. How was that?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was literally very quickly. I called up Aviator, say, hey, I want to get trained. They're like, well, we're full, we're backed up, but hey, we got this alliance partner thing. We got Ron out there. So I called them up and I said, well, where do you guys train? I want to come out and check it out. And I did. And I took one of my drones. I was doing commercial drone stuff and did some videos for them. And as soon as I saw it, I was just like chomping at the bit. Like these guys are out kiting in the field. I'm like, give me that. I got to try this, and I just can't wait. And he's like, well, we got an open slot, 2 weeks from now. And I'm like, I'm in, I'm in. There's no question. We're doing this. And so that was awesome. And as soon as I started training, I just felt compelled to just doing whatever it takes to just become an instructor as well. And work with and have Ron mentor me and do all those things and help out, and so it was an amazing process.
All right. So now, when I asked you earlier, I asked you how long have you been training, and you said basically since I've started. Is that right?
Yeah, once I got trained and started flying, whenever Ron would have a new class, I would just show up and just work with the guys doing basic kiting, helping them out kiting. Doing that sort of thing, and then eventually, work my way up into more and more responsible things, to getting on the radios and things like that, and that's what I wanted to do.
All right, so I was just reading I'm going to ask this question real quick, and we'll come back to the paramotoring. But Anthony Peregrino just asked, how about viewing or passing over major storms or hurricanes? Were you able to see that stuff pretty clearly from up there?
Oh yeah, because you're above everything. You get down to the equator, and thunderstorms and things can get higher. They can almost get up to your altitude, but anywhere else they're well below you. So yeah, it's never really an issue. There was one of our pilots had an interesting situation down near the Panama. There was a big tropical, thunderstorm cyclone thing below him. And he was over it and thought no big deal. So he just flew right over the top of this thing. But as he flew into like the center of this thing, he actually started descending. It kind of makes sense when you think about it. The low pressure in the middle of this thing, the airplane follows what's called the isobars. It's following the pressure altitude as it flies. So when it went into the center of this thing, he descended. And so now he's in the middle of this thing. He felt like he was in the bottom of a toilet bowl, looking up all around him going, how do I get out of this thing? I can't just climb and get out of this thing. What am I going to do? But as he went to the other side, he just rode the pressure wave right up and out of it, just the same way he descended into it. Wow. So really bizarre, phenomena. But yeah, typically everything is below you though.
Desert Aviators is the name of the paramotoring school, correct?
Yes, it is.
And there's going to be in the description of this show, there is a link to that. So if you're in the area, which is
Yeah, Santan Valley, southeast Phoenix
all right. So if you're in the
area.
area and you want to take some lessons, you
Yeah.
can. First of all, I do want to say a quick thank you here to DP. DP just, oh, I love when he does his alms for the poor because I definitely need the alms for the poor. There you go, baby. So thank you, DP, for that $10 donation to the show. Um, Anything unique about your training, or is it, hey, I learned from Ron, I learned from one of the best out there, and that's kind of how you do it, or is there anything unique?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I learned because we were an alliance partner with Aviator for a number of years, and one of the things we're really proud of is the syllabus, the ground training that we use is the best I've ever seen. It was developed by John Isley and these guys,
Mm-hmm.
just amazingly talented guys. I mean, it's like I've sat and watched it with other professional pilots, and we get done, we're just like, dude, that's like the most amazing thing we've ever seen. Yeah, he's definitely got a gift, and so we've adapted it, to suit our needs. So that's one of the things we feel that we've got probably the best ground training, out there at the present time. We have we fly trikes. We have a Parajet Falco trike that we use for doing our tandem stuff. We fly Parajet and ozone wings. So that's what we use as our school equipment. So we're very happy with that. Parajet's been awesome to work with, helping us get started up. And that's pretty much after we moved here last year. That it took with COVID and everything else, it took a good 6 months to get all that infrastructure and things in place, our motor simulators and all the things that we need to do student training. You get up full up and running.
How many students do you train at a time, and how often are you starting new classes?
Ideally, we'd like to have like 4 students in a class, because that way we can just maximize the ground training. And so we've done that a few times. And but other than that, we're pretty flexible with my schedule. A lot of the other local instructors are only available to work on the weekends, but with prior notice, I'm available. I can work, ideally like a 7 to 10 day in a row class. That's how we like to do stuff, because then you get that quick concentrated training and you don't lose out as much, just doing it piecemeal every weekend.
Yeah.
So that's what we try to do. So we're very flexible with our to work with whatever your needs are. I mean, if we have a lot of guys who are available only in the mornings, weekends, and then only in the morning. So sure, I can do that any day of the week. First thing in the morning, we'll go out and fly and be done by 9 o'clock so they can go off to their day job.
Nice. Now, I know you have a little bit of a passion for teaching airspace. Why is that?
Well, just coming out of the military, I have an understanding of what's going on up above you that a lot of the people don't see. They're asking like, well, why do we have these different cloud clearance requirements? It's like, well, because if you're some guy coming out of the cloud, not paying attention, you just pop out of a cloud, you need to have these limits and these distance requirements, so they don't plow into somebody. And so because of the background that I have, I can explain that, I think, in a way that is really good. And here in Arizona in particular, we have a lot of like all the lakes, for instance. Every single one of the lakes in Arizona, it's a wilderness area. So, pilots are requested to, stay 2,000 feet. So it's one of those gray areas that it's like, well, technically, yes, you can. But if anybody complains, and you kind of have to look at your audience, to see what you might be running into. So there's a lot of places where, yeah, technically you can fly that maybe we really shouldn't if we want to, be able to enjoy the freedoms that we have as much as we have.
Yeah.
And not have fields closed out to us. That is one of the challenge right now, is just, suitable LZs.
I've actually wanted to take a paraglider off of a Flatiron on the Superstitions for probably 6 years now, 5 years, but not sure if it's legal.
Right.
Well, there's a lot.
Yeah, I was up at Lake Roosevelt and just happened to post a picture. We were up there in our RV, and somebody said, "Oh, here's some pictures of our LZs we flew off at the lake." And I was like, "Whoa, wait a minute, what's going on there?" But then I realized they were involved in a search and rescue operation, so they got invited in to go fly. So I'm like, "That's awesome!" So yeah, they had free reign to just go take off from wherever, and so that was very cool.
Oh, sign me up.
So I want to ask you one more question. Then I got a bunch of other questions that came in from the
Mhm.
chat. But let me ask you this question. I kind of ran off a little bit of just something, I guess, emotional that's been stirring me. And I know John and I have had conversations about just safer flying as a community altogether. Have you seen things like that? I mean, I've even heard stories, and I don't want to throw anybody in the bus. There's people out there that I absolutely love that are instructors, but I've heard of instructors showboating in front of their students, and I've seen it. I've seen it happen. And when I believe when a new pilot or a future pilot sees that, they think it's easy, they can do it, and then they get hurt. I mean, what's your take on all that? What kind of message can you send to the community in regards to something
Yeah,
like
I
that?
agree. I learned in Austin, Ron telling me situations where other instructors, were doing, very talented acro pilots, but they flew low, and people would see it and they freak out and they think someone's crashing, and then fields get closed, and then personally, things happen, in the local area that are totally avoidable. So one is, it's very serious business. A lot of times people ask me, like, "Oh, as a paramotor pilot, are you a pilot?" I'm like, "Absolutely." If you're taking off and you're landing, you're doing all these aeronautical decision making. Do I fly? Do I this? You're checking the weather. I says, you're making all the same pilot decisions as anybody. So absolutely, you cannot, someone can't just say no. You are absolutely 100% a pilot. So you have to take it seriously. um, I'm running out of fingers on my hands of buddies of mine from the military who are not with us anymore because of accidents, some that were avoidable, some that were not, and some that were due to just being a little too laissez-faire about, procedures and things, or taking shortcuts. And yeah, so it's a big problem right now that is we need. It's totally tragic
What can
and
we do about
avoidable.
it, Jeff? What can we do about it other than just have an open conversation about it with everyone, like we're doing right now, kind of?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, get quality training is my first, thing, you know, to really get, good quality instruction, and really watch out for that, intermediate syndrome situation. I mean, I looked at myself. I'm like, okay, with my background, am I going to go through this? And I'm like, and, I was kind of wondering, like, is it going to happen to me? And there were things that happened to me that I'm like, yeah, I definitely went through it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't recognize it at the time, but it did happen. But thankfully, as an example, like to this day, I'm like the only person ever to throw a reserve at Aviator. We were doing a big instructor thing down there, and I was up doing a sat entry and experimenting with some stuff. And I blew the entry and I spun my wing,
Hmm.
and it locked me into a full on sat with my brakes locked, and I could not get out of it. But prior to entering that, I've done SIV courses. And even before I did that maneuver, I was thinking, okay, I've got the reserve, I've got this. If I have to throw it, I'm in this area. This is the best location to do it. I'm already mentally planning for if it's going to happen before I even went and did the maneuver. I'm up at 4,000 feet. I'm already, so that when something bad did happen, it was a complete non-event. Eric Fairwell standing there going, man, I'm so glad that happened to you, because this is like a perfect example of why we do this. Everything was worked out perfectly. You've done the training, you've done all that stuff. And so, yeah, it was a non-event in the end. So yeah, I'm always telling people, get as much training as you can. Past your initial training, go back to refreshers, just whatever, to expand your skill set. In fact, I've got a student starting up here just next week. In his initial training, he did a ton of reverses and never really got good at forwards.
Hmm.
And I'm like, sure, let's go out and let's go tear it up and see what we can learn.
I want to quickly thank, okay, Go Bitch Go Racing for a $25 donation. Thank you very much, Go Bitch Go Racing. I might have just demonetized the show, but that's okay. Thank you for the donation. Jeff, I want to go back just for a second to what we were just saying there. And John had asked the question of you, what else can we do, besides just having these conversations right now? Because in some cases, if you think about back when you were first a student, and forget the whole U2, you're cool, okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool, you're badass, and probably the most badass person from here to 70,000 feet. But if you go back for a second and think, I'm a new guy, I'm excited, I'm here at training, this guy is not just my trainer, my mentor, but man, I'm almost idolizing him in a way too. And this guy is doing this low acro, and I saw the show on this one Sunday night, and now they said, oh, you shouldn't be doing that stuff. You're gonna get yourself hurt. How does that person go up and say, hey, I don't know if you can even say anything to the instructor, because then might get shunned by the instructor, or is it something that you got to mentally put away and say, okay, look, he's doing this. This guy's been flying for years and years and years. He's been trained to do this. This isn't something I should go and do for the next several years. What's your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting because I train with Ron. Ron is one of those guys. You'll never see Ron doing something stupid down low. It's just not in his character makeup.
Right.
This is not who he is. Me personally, I am the other way. I mean, I go up and I'll go up and play student mode demo stuff, but I do enjoy going up and having fun and doing things as the situations, whatever I feel like. So yeah, it is kind of a hard thing. One, it's kind of like knowing your environment, like who's out there watching, what are you doing? And I'm always trying to be really cognizant of, okay, why am I doing this? Is this for me? Or is it, if the thought ever comes into my mind of like, oh, this is something I want to do for someone else to see, I just have to immediately just kind of squash that, because that's when bad things happen. And
isn't it amazing that the very first thing that when you go to a fly-in, the person that's running the fly-in, they get up, they do a pilot briefing, and what do they all say? Don't do anything low to the ground. Don't go showboating up here. Nobody cares. Get up and get out, right? And it's for good reason.
Yeah.
It's for your safety. I'm not gonna lie. I'm nervous as heck about bad apples because there's gonna be 300 people there, and that field, John, is gonna get real small real quick, won't it? So, and Dave is gonna be there too, and that makes me even more. No, I'm kidding, Dave. He's a great guy.
That's true. Because when you are at a big event like that, there are so many amazing pilots out there. I know no one's going to be interested in watching whatever the hell I'm trying to do. So.
All right, I'm gonna get some questions in here. We are at the 10 o'clock hour Eastern time, but we're gonna fire these questions in here too. Let's start with Chris Fenimore, who also just made a $5 donation. Thank you, Chris, for that. He says in the donation, he says flight test videos are the reason I am training at Aviator in 6 days. Chris, finally you're training. Congratulations, buddy. Best of luck to you, buddy. But his question says, does Jeff own a fixed wing? Does he prefer PPG over fixed wing? Do you own a fixed wing?
No. I have a family. I have 4 kids. I've came out of the military. I didn't have money. So yeah, no, I do not have a fixed wing other than some RC stuff. Yeah. Nope.
There you go. Next question comes from Mark H. So what is the most fun? U2, tanker, B-52, jets, commercial, or PPG? Great question, Mark.
Oh, PPG by far. I mean, flying the T-37 was fun to do acro stuff, but it's someone else is paying the gas bill. So, I can't afford to buy one of those things, but yeah, flying the paramotor is, I mean, I've done videos around here flying around the Santans, and I've shown it to my son, and he's just like, why doesn't everybody doing this? It's like a 3-dimensional dirt bike. I'm like, yeah, exactly right. It's like that ultimate freedom. I mean,
so surreal.
Here's a great story, a quick one. Right after I finished training, I told Ron this. I was on my very first flight back at Southwest Airlines, taken out of Houston Hobby. I pushed the power up after we got cleared for takeoff. We're rolling down the runway, and I was kind of like, there's no wind in my face. It's like, boring. This is lame. Yeah, I was wanting to feel that wind rush as I'm going down the runway. And yeah, nothing compares to paramotors.
Interesting. Next question comes from my friend from the land down under, Walter Pereira. He says, did Jeff fly and land in Australia? Where did he land? Have you ever landed in Australia?
No, never down there.
All right. Next question comes from Resurgence PPG. Has Jeff ever landed an LA speed check type situation? Has Jeff ever had an LA speed check type situation? What is an LA? I don't know what that is. Can you explain that?
Yeah, there's a famous story of in the SR-71 world where there was a one of the pilots, center aircraft were always like, hey, what's my ground speed? And then they go on, and then people started upscaling. Next thing you know, some twin checks in. There was like some F-18 that checked in, and And then the last thing that showed up, it was one of our the sled drivers. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we're doing like Mach 3," and everyone's like, "Yeah, okay, shut up." And yeah, so that's the LA speed story.
Okay. Another question from Mark H. Proverbial feud. Okay. The old question, which do you prefer, foot launching or wheel launching? If you had to choose one, which would it be?
Oh, I prefer foot launch by far.
Yeah.
One, mostly for the flexibility of just being able to take off in far more locations and wind conditions. Once I started flying trikes, I really have come to appreciate just how, I can take off in a lot more wind, foot launch, doing a reverse than I could ever do in a trike with the equipment that I have. I mean, I know there are some trikes that you could, do things, but with ours, yeah, I'm not taking off in anything high winds because I don't want to be blown backwards. So
No,
yeah, for me, a foot launch for sure. But there's a lot of fun with
it's a,
either way.
it's a conversation and a debate I think our Paramotor Nation needs to have because as John was saying, there's nothing like foot that running into the sky. But as my friend Dave, who forever was foot launching and called himself trike flyer, now we can't get him on the foot launching. He loves his trike now, right, Dave?
Oh
So
yeah, the trike is a blast.
yeah.
I love doing touch and goes and just yeah, it is fun, just in different ways.
Mark H with another question. Thank you, Mark, for all these questions. Okay, he says, in my area of flying, I've seen a couple KC-130s flying at about 200 feet AGL. Do you know what's up with that? Wasn't up at the time, but pretty discerning.
They might be on what I call VR routes or IR routes, low level routes, military training routes. There's a number of them all around. So that's another one of those airspace things. Look and find out if any of these routes are crossing where you happen to be flying, because yeah, they could ruin your day very quickly. Like in the T-37, we flew our low levels at 1,000 feet, which is not much. T-38s we could fly on low level routes down to like 500 feet, but other aircraft they could be down in the weeds, doing 500 knots, which would really ruin your day if you happen to run across one of those.
Yep. Kelby Cox wants to know, are you going to be a Bad Apple? Can you believe it? Oh my gosh, Bad Apples is like 3.5 weeks. It's like right around the corner.
22 days.
Holy cow. Are you going to be at Bad Apples? He said he would love to meet you. Kelby is one of our Resurgence guys, and thank you for your service. And I have that circled here on my pad is to say thank you at the end of the show for your service and all that you did. And thank you so much for all of our vets. We love them. And yeah, are you going to be at Bad Apples this year?
I don't think so. That's one of the ones we've not been able to make yet, and this last year has been really tough trying to get away to these things.
No, we hope we get to see you there. All right,
Jeff, I got a question from Graham Speck. He wants to know if those are left-handed bases behind you.
No, that's right-handed.
Okay. Sometimes the backgrounds are reversed, though.
No, it's correct, but yeah, those are actually. Let's see. Yeah, actually, those are all the two lighter colored ones are ones that I built. I made those from scratch.
Very cool.
Yeah, they play very well.
I want to thank John Wayne for his donation to the show. He says, dedicated to my deceased prop. I'm so sorry for your loss. I actually read that wrong the first time I was about to, because we were talking about the whole bathroom thing, and I was going to say something different. I'm glad I read it a second time. But John Wayne, thank you for your donation to the show. Appreciate it, buddy. Let's see. Next we have, I hit the wrong button. Hot Buttered Steve. He says, notice some, he just said it. There you go. There you go. I think we already answered that question.
Andrew Lutz has a question.
What's the question? Did I miss it?
What percentage of days are flyable where you live in Arizona? And also, how large is the PPG community there?
It's pretty good sized. On our local flying place on the weekends, we've been out there and 15, 20 guys out there flying, which was you never saw that many in Texas. So we are blessed with a lot of flying weather. In fact, when I first moved here, I was teasing Ron, let him know that we got one problem here. It's like we've got no wind. It's like this sucks, and trying to teach guys reverses, but in the summertime, in the afternoons, it kind of becomes unflyable for a few months, just because it never cools down enough to where it just is comfortable flying at all. So, but the mornings are always still good typically. And every once in a while I get some weird weather condition, roll through where we get blown out like anywhere else. But overall, we have a lot of flying weather.
There you go. Mark H., thank you very much for your donation. He says, thanks for being here, Jeff. Mark H. PPG Trike Jockey. So there you go. Thank you for your donation. I really appreciate everybody's donations to the show. That's wonderful. That's a very long bell there. Hey, Mr. Dave Ruff, sir. I believe you have a question because we want to give away this Lone Star Paramotor hat, if that's okay with you, sir. Do you have a question for the chat? And everybody will keep your eyes on the chat, and between Dave and John and myself, we'll figure out who answers this question first. What do you got there for us, Mr. Dave?
I've got 3 questions. Do you want a really hard question? Do you want a medium question or an easy question?
Medium.
Mr. Ruff says medium, or Mr. Ripman says medium. Yes. I'll throw in an Our Paramotor Nation sticker for the winner as well. How's that?
Are you sure you don't want the hard question? Because I think this would trip everybody up. But all right.
Wait, is it when did you start flying? And the day and the month?
No.
That was a hard question. No one got that question. By the way, in case you didn't know it, Dave runs a little show on Wednesday night called After Dark. So it's on the Trike Flyer YouTube channel. Make sure you check that out. It's a lot of fun every Wednesday night, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock Central.
I appreciate it.
Let's go with the
medium question it is. For the win, for the hat, for the glory, how often does the YouTube refuel in air on a typical sortie?
Wait a minute. YouTube? Like YouTube? Like
no,
YouTube. YouTube.
I thought you said YouTube. How often does the U2 plane? All right. Todd Scandrett says Korea.
How often in a typical mission sortie does the U2 refuel in air?
All right. Let's see. Who's going to answer it first? Let's see here. I think
No, don't count that one.
Who said it first?
No, actually, she's watching the show.
No one. No. Who
Sorry,
won?
Sarah.
Who got it?
Well, now you gave it away. Well, here we go. We got a bunch. So the first one looks like Justin. Whoa, Tyler Vowles looks like the first one.
Tyler Vowles. All right. I saw Tyler Vowles said never. Yeah, Sarah said not at all, but come on. That could be Dave. He's logged in as Sarah, too.
No, she's right there.
She's already wearing it.
My hands were
you know what?
Here.
Sarah's already wearing a T-shirt tonight that she won on the show. So Tyler Vowles, congratulations. You are the winner of the hat. So there you go.
You got to give something else. I want to ask this hard question. I want to see how much people are paying attention.
All right. So I'll tell you what. We'll do this. Tyler wins the hat. He wins the sticker. If you want to ask one more question, a very difficult question, I'll give a sticker away tonight. By the way, Tyler, make sure you send me your address. You can send it through Facebook Messenger to me if you don't have me on Facebook Messenger if you can't find it. Then you can go and it's davidwolf51@gmail.com. All right, one other question. Yes, it is rigged, Sarah. It is rigged. It's rigged so that people involved in the show cannot win.
Sarah, I have one of the hats out there.
There you go.
You can just put that one on.
There you go.
All right. So,
by the way, Jeff, did you know? Does Jeff should know these answers, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He should.
All right. I hope so.
I mean, he was there.
All right. It's like saying, can Jeff win the answer? Can he? I don't know. All right.
In the show, Jeff spoke about his mom and his dad. What was Jeff's mom's profession?
Jeff's mom's profession. Wow.
He did mention it.
Jeff's mom's profession. What do you got?
David Wolf.
Yes, sir.
What a great guest. I can hear this guy talk for hours more.
Know.
We're going to have to have him on in the future again.
Yeah.
He's definitely
I don't know if he's enjoyed being here. I'm looking at Jeff's face right now. Did he really enjoy it?
Oh yeah, this has been great fun.
Jeff, when I come down for the Arizona Renaissance Festival, I'm down there for about 10 weeks out of the year. I will expect to buy you a cold drink of your choice and to come fly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We got plenty of room.
Look at the answers.
What is this?
Nurse, a mother.
Somebody got it.
A nurse. What is it?
Dental hygienist.
Is that Super Kendall? Is that it? I see. I see Super Dental. Okay, wait. So I see Flaming Jade. Who else had it? Was there anybody before? Jade?
Adam.
Yeah, I see
Giles.
Adam Giles.
Adam Giles. Giles or Gills? Giles. Gills? Adam Gills. Adam Gills, congratulations.
There you go.
Adam Gills. I'm going to write your name on the back. Adam, you can also send me a messenger or email with your mailing address, and I'll get that out to you. Congratulations. Awesome! Did you guys hear that? Here, wait, here's this one, too. All right. I got a whole list of little sound effects, guys. I'm just looking for the right time to. Here's this one too.
I'm a bad boy.
There you go. All right. Enough. All right. Congratulations to the winners. Let's see. Anything else? I think that was about it. Next week, very special show. Tune in next week. It's going to be, I mean, if you love your vets, you're going to love seeing this episode of it and learning about the Dark Horse Lodge. It's a phenomenal thing that these people are doing in Tennessee. So I'm very, very excited about that. Well, Jeff, I can't thank you enough. Oh, go ahead, John.
Jeff, you're going to stay on for a few minutes with the after show. A couple guys might have some questions they want to ask.
Oh, absolutely. You betcha.
Great. So
great guest. I'd really like to meet you one day. You seem like you've got some good stories and you've done quite a bit.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
There you go. Yeah, Sean Simon, thank you for that. Guys, please help the show. If nothing else, it doesn't cost anything to give a little thumbs up. Show a little love. Appreciate it. All right, guys. Well, again, thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Dave. Jeff, you were awesome. We're going to go into the after show. You're going to see a screen pop up here in a second. It's going to have the meeting ID and the password. I'll leave that up for about 30 seconds, and then we'll see you guys in the after show. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
See you next week.
Jeff.